speaker in this session is Anders Swanson. Anders is a multidisciplinary designer and sustainable transportation policy expert who's worked in advocacy, nonprofit, and professional areas, leaving significant impact on his home city of Winnipeg and other places around the world. He manages walking, cycling, and universal design projects as an independent consultant. His specialties include mapping, ethics, data collection, community engagement, innovative technology, children's mobility, winter design, and art. Did you leave anything out? No?
You just said art.
Art, okay, cool. He was awarded the Manitoba Eco Network's annual individual award and is also a recipient of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal for his work on the Winnipeg Cycling Network. Anders.
Technically, I guess I'm a recipient for whatever the Queen feels like I received it for, but and it wasn't the Queen, it was my city councillor. I just thought I'd start today by looking at a definition of what social means, because I was asked to talk about the social aspect of transit and cycling, and it really got me thinking, because you can really answer that from all kinds of angles, about what is most important. And I think I'm going to say right from the beginning that the most important thing is for walking, cycling to work together in Canada. It isn't right now from a user's perspective. And so I'm going to talk about the very basics of social behavior, which is essentially storytelling. We get very lonely very easily as human beings, and transportation is nothing if not the connection between people. And I'm actually not going to talk about bikes for a little while. Yeah. Before I get going, I first of all want to recognize that we're on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I'm from Winnipeg, Canada, Treaty 1, and home of the Dene, home of the Ojibwe, home of the Cree, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. So yeah, one thing I like about working on human transportation is that first part. Because I get to bring something to conversations that is often missing. Yesterday in that panel with Brent, or on Friday in Winnipeg, I got to talk about, I think one of the strangest things I said was that I thought it was probably the best idea would be for, it was about a BRT and an LRT debate, which I'm not at all qualified to weigh in on. And I said I thought that the best idea was probably to get a dancer to do an assessment for you about what would be the best, because my partner is involved in the dance community and has a very strong connection to human body and movement. And I thought that someone like that would be able to really provide insight that maybe wasn't normally looked at. And so I'm going to come back to some of the nuts and bolts of applying that kind of thinking. After, first of all, asking a quick question. Who here has walked to the bus in the last month? Okay, figured that was the right crowd. Who here has biked to the bus? Okay, cool, thanks. Depending on where you are in the world, you get very different answers for that. But I'll tell you a little bit about Canada Bikes, because by now you're probably thinking, who's Canada Bikes? And one thing I'd like to point out is I'm just the chair, so I'm a volunteer, so I get very little accountability. But I have also my executive director, Judy, who's in the room, and she'll be here with you for longer. I have to abscond to a conference on walking in Calgary that starts tomorrow, but she'll be here for the transit, the lobbying day tomorrow, which I'm really excited for, and I really wish I could join you, but I just can't. But Judy's here, will tell you lots more about Canada Bikes if you want to learn more. We're also, I think, maybe one of CUTA's newest members, so we're really excited about that. And anyways, I've always looked fondly on what you folks do. And I guess my goal is that you understand a little bit about how cycling can help you, because I want you to succeed, because fundamentally speaking, if it's pouring rain, I want you to be there. So about Canada Bikes, we have a board of directors from across the country. We started late when it comes to other cycling advocacy organizations at a national level. The League of American Bicyclists, for example, has been around since the 1800s. Just about the Fietsersbond in the Netherlands has a long history. We started in 2012. So we're different from, for example, Cycling Canada, because Cycling Canada is focused on sport, generally speaking, and the racing aspect of things. But of course, we share a lot of common goals, namely not getting killed by automobiles. That one really brings people together. Yeah, we're growing very quickly. So we're very lucky. We're a membership organization. We're very lucky to have some of the biggest, most powerful, strongest, oldest cycling advocacy and design and research organizations from across the country. People like Doyle, Quebec, share the road that you may know around this part. We have two sort of main goals that we're looking for that we think can be instrumental in the future of Canada. First of all is a dedicated fund for walking and cycling. I don't have to tell you what that's done, what PTIF has done for transit. And while we're really excited to see it included, we recognize that there are jurisdictional issues and a lack of overlap in areas that are really, really important to address. Not only that, but Canada's cycling infrastructure deficit alone is at least $64 billion. That estimate comes from what it would take to rebuild the Netherlands' cycling infrastructure network if you were to start today, which is basically where we are. We're a much bigger country, etc. Urban-rural split is different, but ballpark. So we asked for an annual federal contribution of $700 million. Now, for anybody who thinks that's a big number, I really don't think so. That's sort of 3 overpasses and then you're done. But what that can do, the nice thing about cycling infrastructure is that it's very, very cost effective. The other thing that we're looking at is a national cycling strategy, because it's more than just concrete on the ground, it's also policy, it's also collaboration. A lot of other countries have, I just randomly grabbed, that's Germany, Australia, Denmark. It's to the point where there's so many that the EU is developing its own now. Sweden just announced theirs. So it's time for Canada to have one of these. But of course, a national cycling strategy works best when you're working in terms of the people who it actually benefits. So you almost can't design cycling infrastructure without designing walking infrastructure at the same time. For example, a lot of the policy, a lot of the land use things are very similar. So we're working with Canada Walks and the National Active and Safe Routes to School program in order to put together distinct strategies that address all 3 of those things. Which is, of course, part of a general thing which is about mobility. The reason to say mobility is because me as a person, I don't really think about it like that. And when somebody calls me a cyclist, it drives me nuts because I don't think about that. I actually think, where am I going? Is there a lot of traffic? Am I going to grab my car? No. Maybe I'll skateboard to the bus. And that kind of thing are the decisions we make. And we like making those decisions and we want to have options. So this is something that actually a professor at the University of Manitoba, I was very proud because he sent me this on Friday after my speech, because I blurted this out in response to some stuff. But I said the real problem is that actually I'm talking to you in your room full of transportation specialists, but what I'm trying to tell you is that you want to not make people go anywhere. That's really what you're doing. And I'm going to this 5-day international conference on walking, and most of it is about the art of lingering, which is, I cannot tell my mom that that's what I do for a living. And even walking, she said, they have conferences on it? So, but anyway, this is the thing we're up against. What we're really trying to do is make people stay, and the reason we're trying to make people stay is because that's what we like. You know, what interests people most? Watching other people. So that's what cycling is about. Here's another question, or here's not a question, here's a challenge for you. Think about cycling for 3 seconds. Ready? Think about riding a bicycle. Okay, so that was better than injecting you each with serotonin. And there's a reason that physical activity is one of the best forms of medicine. It's because it allows you to reduce anxiety and reduce stress. So those old people in France who live to 110 and chain smoke and drink a bottle of wine every day, it's not because of the chain smoking and the wine, it's because they're super chill. Right? And it probably is also because they walk to the bakery. So this is really what transportation is about. This stuff, I know all of this already, but I just want to underscore this just to make sure I catch you. Which is that right now, transit in general in Canada, I'm going to say this in a blanket generalization, but it's true, I'm going to say just 99.9% of the time, Transit is, if we're lucky, is designed to be able to walk to the station. I would argue that we're terrible at walking as well. Because fundamentally walking, by the way, what it comes down to is you need 30 km/h maximum operating speeds on residential streets, and you can't cross an arterial road with more than 2 lanes in one direction, basically because a 14-year-old can't process it from using their innate cognitive abilities. And so basically you need to redesign our whole transportation network in order to make busing viable fundamentally from a walking perspective. That's my quick pitch. But for cycling, what's beautiful about it, if you do it properly, is you get 3 clicks compared to the 1 click that, let's say, I'm just rounding up. Normally I know it's normally 800 meters, but I'm gonna go with 1 click so it's easier. But what's special about that, because of the way the area of circle works, you get 9 times the value out of a single station. That doesn't mean that you're not gonna overlap with some other stations or other routes, so you might be thinking, well, is that really true? Is that gonna, you know? But the reality is that you reach far more people with the existing investment. And this is why cycling is talked about as the most efficient investment in mass transit. So as long as you accept cycling as transit, and I don't mean just bike sharing, I mean every person, mass transit, it's almost the fundamental, simplest version of a mass transit because it's super decentralized and have one each. I don't know why it gets to be mass transit, but cars don't. But anyways, let's say, all right, then it's the simplest form of and most efficient form of mass transit. I just, for example, one of the things that it actually does in practice, so I've been living in the Netherlands for a little while lately, and so I got really used to being a bicycle and train commuter. You could pick a station, which was ever most convenient, and bike to it. And because the bike has such a large radius, you had all kinds of options. The reason we need to work together is this is really when it comes down to the issue. It doesn't matter if it's powered by robots or fairy dust or hydrogen, it doesn't matter. It's still 2,500 pounds of death from the perspective of a lot of people. And so in order to do something about that, we need to think about people's stories. So when I was asked in my hometown, this was from on the perspective of being executive director of Winnipeg Trails, what we should do in order for the new bus rapid transit stations, because basically they had not yet really fundamentally looked at walking and cycling to the station. They said, what should we do? And I said, just pick 3 random places about 3 kilometers to 1 kilometer around each station and tell a story. And your main character is somebody going to pick up their dad in a wheelchair, and he's got the stroller that day, and he's doing this. We do a really, really bad job of that. Because if we did do that, we'd recognize that this is actually the best part of driving, right? We know this. And how do you match that kind of thing? Because this kind of thing, transit-oriented development, great, but we love to complicate things. We have all this probably, a lot of the time. We just need to be able to have access to it, and that's what people actually want to replicate, because people have their favorite stuff. They don't necessarily want to go to the new, as yet unbuilt thing that's there. They want to go to their bar, right? The bicycle allows you to do all kinds of things. The bicycle also allows you to meet up and this kind of thing. So combining cycling and transit, not only does it reach larger radius, but it allows you to give the freedom of driving to people that walking just doesn't quite do. Not in Canada, because of the urban fabric. We just can't compete on foot. At some point it's just too far to be able to do some of the things. This is really important. One of the things that keeps a lot of people from taking the bus is the fact that they want to make sure their kid gets safely to school. And they want to drive them because they feel that that's safe. So to me, an active and safe routes to school movement is equally, it's not just about the bus, but it's equally about making transit viable so that mom or dad can then carry on and do their own independent mobility. This is where we are in Canada right now. So social aspects, this is a video I have in Montreal. If you ever want to see it, it's unbelievable. It's beautiful. She's so cute. I followed her down into downtown. She was moving cars out of the way for her mom. Anyway, a couple other social issues. So I talked about children a little bit. Children, as far as I'm concerned, have the right to walk and bike to school. I don't know what happened. But if you ask them, they all want to. So that to me is good enough reason. We have a crazy gender split for cycling in Canada that's really awful. In my city it's 70-30. Like, in terms of transport, I can't think of a more segregated and weird scenario that we're not doing anything about than this one. which is that it's overwhelmingly male. All kinds of reasons like for that, I'm not going to go into it, but this is from StatsCan, but yeah, that's the overall one in Canada. So it's mostly about this. So this is a shot from Amsterdam. I also have a beautiful video of this, where they're just chatting and there's two backseat drivers trying to convince their mom and dad which way to go. But my Honda Civic has a passenger seat for a reason. So if you're ever doing what I would suggest you go try and do, if you don't have one, is do a bicycle plan for every single major station investment that you have. Shop it around to the Public Works Department if you're not in charge of it, but at least get somebody on it who's coordinating the bicycle aspect. And make sure that that can happen on that infrastructure. Right now in Canada, we're doing a terrible job of that. I've seen one little piece in Ottawa where you were actually able to ride side by side, and lo and behold, you had a whole family at the National Art Gallery where I saw it, where there's a raised cycle track. Little section turns into green paint and weird two-wayness on a 70-kilometer-hour bridge and all kinds of stuff. But that's what you're aiming for, because that's what people already do. That is your baseline user for a sidewalk, and it needs to be that wide, because like it or not, whether or not you have a cognitive, hearing, visual, or physical impairment, you're going to end up with one, believe me, and you started with one. So, and just, you know, I referenced this crazy, awesome country, almost done. That's the cycling network. Yeah, it's great, isn't it nice? The reality is they weren't like us either in 1975. Nowhere near. And yeah, so that happens. Great. Can it really happen here? Let's win at the Blue Bombers Stadium. And I counted 1,222. The whole talk about that stadium was how to get people there by bus and car and what a gong show was going to be. Nobody had any idea that 1,222 people were going to show up by bike, but me. Anyway, so thank you very much for having me.